They say the forest whispers to those who dare to enter. Some hear their own names carried on the wind. Others catch glimpses of figures just beyond the edge of sight. But the unlucky ones, the ones who stay too long, never return. Their voices, however, linger, woven into the trees, calling out for someone new to take their place. The stories have existed for generations, passed down in hushed tones around campfires and written in the faded ink of forgotten journals. There are rumors of travelers vanishing without a trace, their camps left untouched, their belongings covered in a fine layer of dust as if they had been gone for centuries instead of days. Others speak of footprints leading into the woods, never out. Those who have dared venture too close describe an unnatural silence, as if the very air holds its breath. The deeper one goes, the stronger the sensation that something unseen is watching, waiting. Some claim the trees whisper secrets, their branches twisting like grasping fingers. The lucky ones leave with only nightmares. The unlucky ones, well, no one knows what happens to them. But there is always someone willing to test the legends, to prove them false, to seek answers where none should be found. Are you listening? The legend of Blackwood Forest had been whispered for centuries. A cursed land, they said, where shadows moved when no one was looking and voices called your name from the void. People who entered rarely returned, and those who did were never the same. But that didn't stop Daniel Carter, a journalist obsessed with uncovering the truth. His obsession with the forest began years ago when he stumbled upon an old news article detailing the mysterious disappearance of an entire family. The accompanying photograph showed a crumbling house surrounded by gnarled trees, its windows empty voids. Something about the image called to him. Despite the warnings, despite the tales, Daniel packed his bags, equipped himself with cameras, a notebook, and a flashlight, and set off toward the place where reality blurred into nightmare. Daniel arrived at the village of Ravenshade, the last settlement before Blackwood. The locals were hesitant to speak about the forest. An old woman at the tavern, her face a map of deep wrinkles, finally relented. "Don't go looking for answers, boy," she warned. "The forest don't just take bodies, it takes your soul." Unfazed, Daniel ventured into the woods the next morning. The deeper he went, the thicker the silence grew. It was as if the forest swallowed sound itself. His camera flickered, the battery inexplicably draining. Then he heard it. A whisper. Soft. Beckoning. Right behind him. Every night in Blackwood was worse than the last. Daniel set up camp near the ruins of an old cabin. As darkness fell, the whispers grew louder, forming unintelligible sentences. He shone his flashlight into the trees, catching fleeting glimpses of shifting figures, dark, elongated, and wrong. His journal was his only comfort, but even as he wrote, the ink bled across the pages, forming words he did not write. "You should not have come." A shadow loomed behind his tent. That night, sleep was impossible. Branches scratched against his tent, though there was no wind. Footsteps circled him, slow and deliberate. He held his breath, gripping his knife, praying for the noises to stop. When dawn finally arrived, Daniel felt as though he had aged years overnight. He pressed forward. The deeper he went, the more the air thickened with something unseen but tangible, something pressing against his skin like the weight of 1,000 unseen hands. And then he found it. The house from the photograph. The house stood in eerie silence, its walls cracked with age, vines strangling its wooden bones. The door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the air was stale, thick with decay. Dust motes danced in the weak sunlight filtering through broken windows. Furniture lay overturned, claw marks gouged into the wooden floors. Family portraits, their faces eerily distorted, still hung on the walls. Something had happened here. Something beyond the grasp of sanity. Then the whispers started again, louder, urgent. He followed them, descending into the basement where an ancient, rusted door stood ajar. Beyond it lay a ritual chamber, the walls painted in dark symbols, candles long melted into the stone. In the center, a single journal lay open. The forest is not cursed, it is alive. A gust of cold air slammed the door shut behind him. Daniel uncovered the remains of an ancient ritual site deep within the forest. The carvings on the stones depicted human figures, bound and screaming, as a massive, unseen entity loomed over them. The whispers turned into screams as he realized the truth. This was no ordinary haunting. The forest itself was alive, and it was hungry. A branch snapped behind him. He turned, but there was nothing there. Then, a voice whispered in his own voice, "Join us." It was then that Daniel realized he was not alone. The more Daniel tried to escape, the more the forest closed in around him. Trees stretched impossibly high, their branches intertwining to block out the sky. The path twisted and turned upon itself, leading him back to the same cursed spots again and again. His supplies dwindled. Hunger gnawed at him. Thirst made his throat raw. Shadows stretched and slithered around him, whispering, laughing, mocking his every move. Then he saw them. Figures standing in the distance, their eyes hollow, mouths frozen in silent screams. The lost souls of Blackwood. They reached for him, their fingers stretching unnaturally long, and then the ground gave way beneath him. Daniel ran, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The trees twisted and moved, blocking his path. The air grew thick, suffocating, as if unseen hands were closing around his throat. He stumbled upon a clearing, only to find himself back at his own abandoned camp. His belongings were covered in dust, his footprints long faded. He checked his camera. The screen showed him standing still for hours, whispering to something unseen. Then, his own voice came through the speaker. "We told you not to come." A month later, a rescue team found Daniel's camp. His journal lay open, the final entry scrawled in frantic strokes. "It's inside me. It's wearing my skin." They never found his body, only a man wandering into town, wearing Daniel's clothes but with empty, hollow eyes. He never spoke. He just smiled and whispered. The legend of Blackwood Forest remains, growing darker with each passing year. Travelers still disappear, their names whispered on the wind, their faces lost to the trees. But sometimes, late at night, villagers swear they see figures standing at the edge of the woods, watching, waiting. Sometimes people hear footsteps behind them when walking home alone, though no one is ever there. Others wake to find their doors slightly ajar, the scent of damp earth filling their rooms. A soft whisper, just outside their window, calls their name. And then, there are the ones who go to sleep and dream of the forest. In their dreams, the trees part, revealing a path winding into endless darkness. They always wake before reaching the end. But the dreams come again, more vivid each time. The path stretches farther. The trees close in tighter. The whispers grow louder. Until one night they don't wake up at all. No one ever finds their bodies. Only their footprints leading into Blackwood Forest. Are you listening? Because the forest is. And it's waiting for you. The legend of Blackwood Forest remains, growing darker with each passing year. Travelers still disappear, their names whispered on the wind, their faces lost to the trees. If you ever hear your name whispered when no one is there, turn away, run, because the forest never forgets, and once it calls you, it never lets go.